Okay, so here's your fan sitting on the roof. You're about a 1/4 inch or maybe just a little under or a little over, maybe closer to 1/2 inch off the roof. It's not enough to splash rain up into the vent, and you can tell that we just bent the original generic brackets that it came with into a Z shape. That's why there's extra hanging out there, and it mounts normal. You can see the space underneath there, and what it does, all this surface area all the way around the vent is free air. Now if you guys park under trees a lot, which campers generally do, you'll know that your well, here's a good example. Now that we're up on the roof, you can see this one. Now this is an old early 80s that just came in for some repair. His vents are on the standard his vent covers are on the standard brackets, and they're very, very close to the roof. They don't have a lot of air movement in there. There's always stuff stuck up under them, like tree sap and pine needles and leaves. This one here is actually caulked to the roof, which is common. I see that a lot. There again, I don't want to name brand anything, but as seen on TV, rubber sealers aren't really effective on camper roofs. But hey, to each his own. We use a specific method that seems to work for us, and this is my 6th year now doing this, and knock on wood, we've been very, very successful, and everybody's been super happy with the results of our camper roofs. Now, we're basically going to use the same method that we used on this generic cover, and I showed you the fan earlier inside. It opens a little bit farther because now it's got all that room to open, so you can open this probably about 80% of what you would do without a cover. Now when you have them mounted like that, you guys know, if you've ever put covers on your vents, that they only open about halfway, and that's normal. The covers aren't high enough to allow them to open the whole way, so these being a little bit off the roof there will give you more lateral room. Now I'm going to start with this vent over here, and I'll show you what you want to do is take your cover, you want to lay it out on the roof to figure out about what your spacing is going to be. Now these are cool because you can see through them. There's no guesswork there. A lot of times you want to open that vent to make sure you got the clearance. Make sure because it's going to swing from closed, it's going to swing up to open, so you want to make sure you don't contact the front of the vent. Now when you lay it out, you'll be able to see your your vent flange there. And what you want to do is try to move this forward. Well, it would be, from our orientation, it would be backwards. Actually, from any orientation, it would be backwards. Sorry about that. And you're going to want to put your bracket on that screw right there. And you're going to want to put another bracket pretty much in between these two screws here. So we're going to have to drill a new hole. Now this is a Fleetwood bounder, so the trusses up here are steel, and they're thick. So you're going to want to use a sheet metal screw. Unfortunately, I brought wood screws up with me, so there again, another tip I'll give you is don't use the screws that come with the camper. They're cheap sheet metal. You want to use a marine screw, something that can withstand water and acid rain or whatever you throw. These are zinc. These are zinc coated screws. They seem to do good in marine applications, so we use them on the roof. And they have like a built-in washer head. They're called a lath screw. We call them fat heads just because they look like they have a washer on them. It spreads the surface area out. It gives you more than a normal screw head would, and they seem to hold a lot better than what the campers come with. You got to remember, when they're mass producing campers, they're using the cheapest materials possible because they have to. If they use the best materials available, everything would cost as much as a tour bus. So it's just mass production versus custom build. So let's get, now that we know about where we want to be, we're going to lay out our brackets. These two, I know I can screw them. I can screw these in on both sides, and then we'll lay out these to get them exactly where we want them because there's no hole there. And then we'll put the cover back over top, dry fit it before we screw anything in. We want to make sure it's going to be correct. That way we don't have a bunch of holes. We don't want any holes that we don't need. So let's do that. The sealer we're using is an adhesive sealer. I don't know if it accidentally gets in the picture. Great. You want to put some over the hole. You want to put it on the screw. You put your screw through the hole and you run it in, and then you'll have sealer down through the hole and under the bracket. Okay, now we got our two front ones screwed in because we know that's where we want to be. We get the sealer, adhesive sealer in the hole doing its job. It's going to help bond everything together. Now, yeah, you can put 2 screws or 3 screws in them, but you don't need to. I've never seen a need to. You put a single screw in here, single screw in the back one, times all 4 corners, and that vent sits on top. It's not going to move back and forth. It can't really twist or go anywhere. These aren't going to move, especially if you're using a high quality adhesive sealer. They're not going to go anywhere, so you don't have to go crazy with the screws. Like I tell everybody, the less holes in the roof, the better. So we're using here the original holes that were in the vent flange. Here we have to make one because of our spacing being a little different. What I've noticed is the generic ones, like this one, generally line up with the holes a little bit better. Now these fans are different too. As you can see, they have a lip all the way around the vent cover, the top, the vent cover there. So they're a little different than your El Cheapos or your average fans. They're not very expensive. I didn't pay. I think maybe $120 a fan or something. So they're not the high end fans. They're nothing really that special, but they move a ton of air. They're low draw, and they're very, very quiet. On the first setting, on number 1, they're actually silent. If you're laying in bed, you can't even hear them running. So let's take our cover and put our cover back over top and make sure that our spacing is correct. Okay, and it is. It lines up with the ears here. It lines up with the ears over there. So now we just have to mark where we want our rear ones, and we'll make a hole. Okay, so we have our front one screwed in. We have the vent just laying on top of them, so we can line these up to where they want to be. And you can see they're a little bit short here and over here. So what we're going to do, now like I said, they're plastic, they're pliable. What we'll do is once we get them, the other two mounted, we'll just pull this edge out a little bit. We'll just stretch it out a little bit. It's not going to hurt anything. Let's get these screwed in. Now be very careful we pick it up. Oh, another thing before I screw these in here, you see that I smoke. 2 things. If you smoke, and hopefully you don't because it's horrible, it'll kill you, don't ever, ever, ever smoke inside of a camper for about a dozen reasons. Don't ever smoke inside of a camper. Don't ever smoke on the roof of a camper. One little ash that doesn't even look like it's hot will burn a hole in EPDM rubber. Don't get campfire sparks near it. Don't get petroleum anywhere near it. Don't smoke on the roof. Don't launch fireworks around it. Keep concentrated heat sources away from your EPDM rubber. If you smoke, never ever smoke inside a camper, and don't smoke on the roof. Alright, let's screw these back ones in. We'll mount this vent. We'll make sure that the vent opens and closes properly, and then we'll move on to the next. Okay, we got our back 2 drilled in. And there again, I use single screw with adhesive sealer in it. When you're waterproofing your vents and stuff up on the roof, you want to make everything watertight, but you also want to make sure you don't leave any crevices that water can get in and freeze. What it'll do is it'll start expanding your pieces. So that's why I put sealer underneath these feet, and when I screw it in, it squishes out, and it doesn't allow water to get in underneath of it. If this is sitting out in the snow in the wintertime, and I'm in the mountains of Pennsylvania, so our winters are sometimes nothing, sometimes they're Arctic. We'll get a lot of wet rain days at a time, just like a soaking drizzle, and it'll creep into every little crack and crevice and orifice and freeze, and it'll expand anything that it gets itself into. So if you'll notice, I don't put a whole lot of sealer over top of my screws just because it's not necessary. These are zinc screws. They'll live out in the ultraviolet light and the weather and the rain and for longer than I'll be alive. So I'm not worried about sealing the screw heads like they do at the factory with that seam sealer. They call it Dicor. There again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to name brand anything, but yeah, I don't put seam sealer on the roof. And here we got our back one screwed in, our front one screwed in. We have adhesive sealer underneath of it. They're already very tight. They don't shift or move at all. We'll put our vent cover on, and we'll have to just stretch it a little bit to get it to match up with our feet, since instead of being bolted straight to the side of the vent, we actually bolted them to the flange, so they're out a little bit farther, just a hair more than they should be, the way they're designed to be used. So we'll pop that on here, and we'll get a good look at it.